Hey everybody, this is Stormworks, and this little boat is the Cheetah. I was looking on the workshop to try and find some boats that were good, and I found some that could fly and all sort of stuff, but I didn't find any that just handled well at high speeds. So I thought I would make one, and that's what I've done. This is the Cheetah. It's capable of sustained speeds of 160, and it just kind of works. You don't need to have any complicated controls, nothing like that, and you can steer it just fine. Oh, look, there is another prototype Cheetah that errored out and is still flying around. So how does it handle? Well, it handles pretty good. You can go download it and play with it if that's what you're into. I'm going to talk about it in great detail now so that we can, learn how to build this kind of boat. It has some details that are a little complicated, which is probably why there aren't very many super fast speedboats that handle well, but it's not too hard once you understand the basics, and this is the part of these games I love the most, when you understand the situation well enough that you can create vehicles that probably operate better than the creator of the game really ever intended. And this is just a really, really fast speedboat. Yeah. Only problem with it is it doesn't decelerate very well. How does it handle in choppy weather, you might be asking? Well, let's find out. Come on, stop, go away. There we are. So the answer is that it handles fine. The speed gets a little choppy, but it sustains 100 plus kilometers an hour, even though it sounds like it's burping all the time. To stabilize it a little bit in choppier weather, you can always trim down. Trimming down will reduce your speed, but it'll also reduce the amount of burping you do. Since you have a contained space for your command chair, there's no risk of drowning. So you can even take this thing to be, largely an aquatic vehicle if you'd like. Now you might be wondering, how fast are we going? We're sustaining about 100, even in this kind of choppy weather, and we're not seeing very much in the way of being diverted around. And we can continue to increase our trim if we want more and more stability in rougher and rougher weather. And that should just keep us going pretty well here. See? No problems at all. So when's the last time you saw a speedboat that could go 100 kilometers an hour through choppy weather like this? If you've seen any others, I'd love to hear about them. I must have missed them in my workshop excursions. So now the question is, how does this thing work? Well, it uses a lot of tricks, and I think they're fun, so we're going to talk about them. Let's go ahead and take this thing back to our workshop. Welcome back. So this is the Cheetah, and what we're going to do is just take a look at, how do I get rid of the colors here? There we are. We're just going to take a look at how it's laid out and what sort of setup it has. The Cheetah is a jet-powered boat. Here's the jet. See it? Right in the middle of the ship. So obviously this is an exploit. Jets aren't supposed to work like this, but you can just stick jets inside of a room and they'll work, and that's exactly what I've done. So the jet exhaust fires straight through this wall, and the intake pulls straight from that wall. At some point, I expect that they'll fix this exploit, at which point I'll have to be a little more careful about it. But the whole point here is that the jet engines are by far the best engines you can use. However, if you've ever played around with jet engines before, you may have noticed that if you put them in a room like this, or something like, something similar to this, they stop working right. They'll just randomly turn off, and then they'll sit there and spin at 180 revolutions per second, and it'll never go down, but no thrust will ever be produced. It's just, why is it not working? Well, the reason is because there's no load. If it's not outside, it calculates a load wrong. So what we've got here is a little power element coming off, and that's where we put our load. The load simply comes back to the rear of the ship here, and this is the load that we add on to our jet engine. We've got a water jet. Water jets are great because they are able to produce thrust even when they're not in the water. I've tried using propellers before, but the problem with propellers is that they have to be in the water or in the air. They can't switch between the two very safely. And if they are in the water or in the air, it means that their center of thrust is really low or really high, and that really makes the ship not handle very well. But with a water jet, you can suspend it right at the center of mass and then just run a conduit down to suck water up from the water. And that is a super, super nice thing to do, because it means that you can just have it positioned at the center of mass of the ship, and it doesn't matter whether the ship is above the water or below the water. It doesn't have any care about that at all. As long as this little port is in the water, the jet will continue to fire. And that's a great way to produce some load. But there are times when that jet won't be firing, like when we actually leave the water, when we're skipping across waves or whatever. And so for that, we've got these two little generators, and that's just enough to create a little bit of load for kicking the jet engine back up a little bit whenever there's no other loads. It also means that we don't need anything besides this teeny tiny little battery and a tiny starter motor. So that sort of stuff just works, and so that's the core element of this ship. I use a jet engine and I introduce a tiny, tiny load to it. Even the water jet is only like 5% load. So it's really, really great. You can get a ton of power out of the jet engine. I've tried to create higher loads, like more water jets and stuff like that, but I can't fit them on a frame like this without spinning out of control. So we went with a single water jet because that's nice and balanced. Feel free to play around with it yourself if you'd like. There are, however, a lot of other tricks that make this boat work. One of the tricks is that this is a very flat, square boat. The bottom of the boat is extremely flat. If you have a rounder bottom, then you can have more stuff in your boat. You got more buoyancy and more room in your boat. But that's not a concern for us. Our concern is how it handles at high speeds. And we could go with a hydroplane sort of solution where you just got like two little legs coming down like this. But the problem with that sort of solution is that when you try and turn, it destabilizes and you die. But a nice flat bottom like this never destabilizes, and you can basically just scoot sideways without ever flipping. That's really fantastic. It's incredibly helpful. These wings are simply an extension of that, so that when we're wallowing a little bit, the wings make sure that we never flip. They'll slap into the water and create more flat area to push us back up. The whole result here is an incredibly stable, high-speed turn. These wings are carefully positioned at the waterline. This is the waterline when the ship is just sitting there. So it really operates quite well just with the basic idea of this flat shape on the bottom and this wing to create additional flat shapes in emergency situations. More secrets. The control surfaces here are all automatically controlled. What I do is I simply take the tilt and the yaw of the ship, and the tilt and the roll, of the ship, and I multiply them, and then I put them back in, and these automatically adjust our tilt and our roll, our pitch and our roll to keep us flat. And that's really, really effective, and it means that the ship never really starts to wobble like in some of these ships. Like, some of these will go like up and down, or they'll twist left and then they'll stay twisted left. This fixes that. Now, I use these large control surfaces because they're not usually in the water. They're usually in the air. So we need a fairly large control surface like a jet plane does. So that's what I've done. These are basically jet control surfaces on the boat. There are two tiny little control surfaces here. These are just turn assists. All they do is help you turn. But this, of course, has turn built into it. The water jet has left and right actuators as well as an up-down actuator, which means that we can control our turn with both these and the water jet. The water jet also controls the manual pitch. So basically, as with the jet, I've got a bunch of manual controls and a bunch of automatic controls, and they use completely different control surfaces. I just think that is easier. It produces less complexity in the end, even though there's more stuff going on. Let's see. Other complexities? Well, the biggest one is that when this ship is turning, there is a turn inhibitor. So one of the problems that you get with these kinds of ships is that when you are trying to make really, really rapid turns, it will just start to go into a tailspin, and it will just sit there and rapidly spin. So to show you an example of that, if we were going like this on another boat and we hit hard left, we would just be going in really, really tight circles, and we'd be out of control, and we wouldn't be able to stop. And part of that is because as you're spinning in circles, your control surfaces will keep impacting the water off-center, and you'll go faster and faster in circles. But another part of that is simply that you want to have a spin inhibitor so that you don't ever completely flip out. And the way to do that is to simply put in a heading element so that it can tell where you're going, and then take the delta, take the delta of the heading element, and that should allow you to safely determine how fast you're spinning. So in this case, what we've done, we turn this back to the workshop and put it away. What we've done is we've got this heading element prominently displayed right on top of the ship. And it pumps down into this object here, which is the heading rotational velocity computer, which is a complicated name for an extremely simple program. It just takes the delta and multiplies the delta by an amount of our choosing. This just tells us how fast the ship is rotating each tick. And so from there what happens is that gets pumped into an add where we take the left-right controls, the AD controls, and we add that to them, so that in the end what we get is something that is our manual heading control times a deceleration control, something that tries to turn us away from the direction we're spinning. And of course, the thing that tries to turn us away from the direction we're spinning is a moderate sort of push, so it's never going to take control away from us, but it does keep us from spinning out of control. Also, I have a thing where the left-right indicator doesn't go straight to any control surfaces. It goes into this adjust throttle by value, and all that does is it means the faster you go, the less your steering actually matters. And that just keeps you from accidentally oversteering when you're at high speeds. So at 80 kilometers an hour, your steering is limited to 0.3, 30%. It's a very, very basic setup, 0.4, I guess. So it's a very, very basic setup. It's just as simple as the other object in terms of what it does. It just takes the value and then divides it by the max value, and then just lerps between the throttle multiple at min and throttle multiple at max, and then multiplies it by the throttle. And the result is that you basically have a weaker input as you go faster. And I can use that to control anything, but in this case I'm controlling the left-right sticks. So when you're trying to move left and right, it moves less as you go faster, which just means that you won't oversteer. And that's the bulk of our logic here. It's just something to keep you from oversteering, and then something to correct your oversteering if it happens anyway. That's really not that hard to grasp, right? So when I think about this kind of ship, I'm always thinking about it in terms of systems that require other systems and systems that operate on their own. Because that way, when I'm thinking about them logically, I can cluster them up. If you've noticed, all of these are in specific clusters. This cluster is the steering control cluster. This cluster is the automated control cluster. And then up here, I've got the WS cluster. This overrides the accelerometer, the acceleration, for going forwards, so you can cut power. So by clustering each of those, I've figured out, well, these all depend on each other. They should all go in the same space, and they should be as modular as possible, because otherwise it's going to turn into spaghetti code. You won't be able to figure out what the heck's going on. Whereas if it's all just like donka, 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 that's easy. It's just like 1, 2, 3, we're done. 1, 2, 3, we're done. 1, 2, 3, we're done. Another example of that is this down here. This is the pump to pump out our sealed cockpit, because it's not actually sealed. And all it does is it turns the pump on if we have more than 0 water in the cockpit. And this is, again, a unit. I put them right next to each other so I won't have to worry about where one unit begins and the next unit ends. There won't be any intermixing of complexities here. Similarly, if we actually look at the outside, we've got these yellow streaks, orange streaks, I guess. These orange streaks are not random. That is actually the edge of the jet module. The jet module runs from here to here. And so I just marked that, and when I was done, I decided it didn't seem like such a bad marking and kept it. That wasn't what I wanted. I was trying to get a There we are. So you can see that that is the extent of the jet element, the box that the jet is kept in. And the jet fuel also happens to be kept in exactly that part of the ship. So here's the jet fuel, see? So by keeping it all in a very, very controlled modular element, I was able to keep it all straight in my mind and create a nice, slick little vehicle that didn't have any sort of complexity to it that I couldn't keep track of. All the complexity was nicely packaged up. The two objects inside the jet chamber with the jet are the two objects required to control the jet. One of them is the jet PID, and the other one is a manual cutoff in case something goes horribly wrong. So those are both tightly related to the jet, so they're in with the jet. Other than that, I've also created a really, really sharp nose. This isn't something you need if you're doing a normal boat, but if you're trying to power through waves and stuff at 100 or more kilometers an hour, you're going to need a sharp nose to split the water and make sure that you don't, A, get slowed down, or B, get your nose pushed into the sky. And that is all of the stuff I can think of for this boat. It's quite simple, which is why I'm a little bit surprised I don't see more people creating boats like this. But it's just a matter of taking the things you know you need and turning them into operational elements that don't confuse you. I think that 99% of the problem or the difficulty with this kind of boat creation is just that people get kind of stuck and are like, oh, how do I shape the bottom of the boat? How do I shape the front of the boat? Well, how do I fit the engine in? How do I get all this stuff working? And the answer is that efficiency is not what you need. Modules are what you need. You want to know how to shape the bottom of the boat? Well, how does your core module feel? Is your core module a jet module surrounded by jet fuel? Then make that the right shape for the keel of the boat, and the rest of the boat will follow. It makes things really, really easy. And if you have sharp delineations at the points where the modules start and stop, then you can just rearrange them whenever you need using the select and cut tools, which is exactly what I did. That bulge above the jet engine that's full of logic, that wasn't initially above the jet engine. It was laid out on the deck into little pods, each of which was colored its own distinct color, so I wouldn't get confused. And then when I was done, I simply cut them and moved them to the place they are now, which is neatly arranged on top of the jet module. You want to see how it looks when we crash? Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Ah! Crash, crash. So, of course, now the problem is that we can't turn off the jets anymore. Oh, no, what are we going to do? Well, we can always do the jet cutoff. Oh, no, the button broke, but there's a second button because I figured it might break. I think it's over this way. Oh. Click. Perfect. We're safe. I didn't include any flares. This must be how the lighthouse package delivery person got stuck up there. He's using a jet boat to deliver lighthouse's stuff. Anyway, that's it. Feel free to download the ship and play with it and recolor it and do whatever you'd like. And I hope this was fun to hear.